Welcome back at All Counts family. This is a beautiful day and certainly a great day to be alive, and I'm excited about this episode. A guy that I've been knowing for a long time, kind of like family to me. You know, we have a great relationship, phenomenal person, man, teacher and leader, husband, all those things. He's inspiration for me, even at his young age. Nicodemus Christopher, how you doing, man?
Coach, I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you sharing your platform with me.
How's life treating you?
Life is good. Life is good. I'm being told what to do by a 3-year-old on a regular basis. So I'm in full-fledged fatherhood mode. So life is good. Watching little fella grow up. So it's
Coach
good.
Nick, you named your son Nicodemus after you. Why did you do that? I mean, did you feel like this? If I ever had a son, this is what I'm doing. How'd you feel about that?
No, I didn't. We actually, Fallon and I, we thought we were gonna have a girl, so we didn't even pick out boys' names. We were thinking we were picking out girls' names the whole time, and then immediately, it's funny. While Fallon was pregnant with Nicodemus, in parallel, I was just doing a lot of introspection, trying to figure out who I was, preparing myself for fatherhood. A part of that is I actually found out the power in the story behind my name. I always knew the Bible story behind Nicodemus and Nicodemus going to Jesus by night, but then I learned what that name actually means, which means leader of the people or conqueror for the people. And once I found that out, I was like, I have to name him because I feel like names have power. So I wanted to speak that forth into his life. And at the same time, it kind of caused a little regret for me, Coach, because I've allowed people to call me Nick my whole life.
Yes.
I think partly because I didn't realize the power in my name.
Yeah.
So now at 3 years old, turning 4 in June, like he won't allow people to call him Nick. And I've actually stopped allowing people to call me Nick. They'll say Nick. I'm no Nicodemus. So yeah, it was one of those things where I found out what it meant, so I passed it on to him.
Hold up, Coach. So he knows at 3 years old, call him Nicodemus.
Yeah, Nicodemus. So that's my name.
Does he say it to his little friends?
Yeah, it's Nicodemus. Now, you know what? Sometimes at school now, they'll call him Nico, and he'll come home. He's like, Dad, they call me Nico. I'm like, it's better than Nick, my boy. So
No, I feel you on that. Coach Nick, tell me a little bit about your upbringing.
Oh, man, Coach, it was, where do I start? So I was born in San Diego, California. Mm-hmm. I was actually, my father was a former, well, we'll call him a former street pharmacist turned missionary. So if you look at the juxtaposition of those two lifestyles, that tells you everything you need to know about my father. And then my mother was a praying woman, right? And through basically both of their experiences, they raised my brother and my sisters and I. I'm one of 7 to be who we are today. But I grew up in San Diego, California, spent a number of my earlier years living in a mission because at the point when my father turned his life around, that was his full-time work. So we lived in the mission. The mission of the mission was to help battered women, was to help the homeless. So we would have every Sunday and Wednesday, the local churches would donate food and donate clothes to the homeless. So that was my father's life's work. So at some point, at the point where we lived in the mission full time, whatever food was being donated to the homeless, whatever clothes were being donated for the homeless, after they would get what they needed, we would eat with them, and we would wear the clothes that were donated as well, if there were some available. So very, very humble beginnings, learning what it meant to serve others who were less fortunate, serve those who were broken and who were coming from traumatic backgrounds. And all we had was each other, right? We had God in each other. So I think those lessons that we learned, we knew the pimps, the prostitutes, the drug dealers, the homeless by name, because they were coming in and out of the mission for the food, the clothes, the fellowship, whatever it might be. So I think that reared something in us. And then around the age of 11, we moved to Texas, so a place called Tyler, Texas. So I spent the first half in San Diego, the later half in Texas, where I went to school, Baylor University, and all the above. So, yeah.
Nicodemus, so you know what it feels like, or you had an up close look with the homeless, hopeless, and helpless.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel embarrassed by all that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. There's one story that still sits with me to this day. I've processed it, but I've learned a lot from it. So I'll never forget. It was at the time when Junior Seau was a really popular football player, the linebacker for the San Diego Chargers at the time. Is when they were the San Diego Chargers. They used to have free football camps for the community. And obviously it was free. So my brother and I attended. But I remember we attended in clothes that were, they were hand-me-downs, right? So we had, the old school, like the boat shoes is what they call them now, but it was boat shoes. So we had on quote unquote dress shoes on a football field. Like, it's funny now.
Don't tell your mom and dad I'm laughing, man. But it's funny.
I didn't think it was funny then, but it was just normal. So we showed up, right? We had on these dress shoes, these boat shoes. They had holes in the bottom of them, whatever. And I'll never forget, my brother and I could not participate in the drills because we kept sliding, right? Because there's no traction on those shoes. And we didn't know any better until the other kids started laughing and making fun. Oh, y'all got dress shoes on, this and that. We didn't know them. We just knew them as shoes, right? So not growing up with those humble beginnings led to situations like that where, as a young kid, it was embarrassing, and it actually developed some insecurities in me that I hadn't dealt with until my adulthood. But yeah, there's plenty of situations like that, Coach.
I've enjoyed my experiences with your mom and dad when I sit there and talk to them. Very intelligent souls, wonderful people to be around, and I love even hearing your dad, all the knowledge and information he has. At what point did you feel like, even though your mom was an educator, did you feel like college was an option for you?
No. My dad always told us, like, because we knew the lifestyle that he lived that led to him spending time in the penitentiary. He always told us from a young age he would lose his life before he allowed us to live that lifestyle and end up. And he used to tell us, is you can't say this type of stuff to your kids now, but he used to tell us, he said, I'll take your life before I allow the prison system to. Right.
If you don't mind, Nicodemus, can you repeat that?
So he always used to talk, it was one of his favorite quotes. It's crazy now because you can't say that to kids now. You end up in the prison system. But he always used to say, I will take your life before I allow the prison system to. So because of that, we knew that was not an option for us, that the street lifestyle and the lifestyle that he lived when he was younger. But because my mother was an educator, education has always been very, very important for us. And they even homeschooled us when we lived in the mission and all that. They homeschooled us. So they told us, my dad he would always tell us, he said, I'll never ask you for anything in your life, but the only thing that I'm going to require from you is for you to at least, if your last name is Christopher and you're one of my children, you have to at least get a master's degree. Right. So at least. Right. So all 7 of us, 5 sisters, 1 brother, all 7 of us have at minimum a master's degree. And then I think we have 3 PhDs and a JD is the other one. So yeah, they didn't play. Yeah.
That's big time there. That's big time. Nicodemus, how did you guys stay out of harm's way? Because I know your brother Gary, who's doing a phenomenal job at TCU. How did you guys stay out of harm's way? And if you got into harm's way, how did you handle it?
Well, it was different. So when we're growing up in San Diego, and we're growing up in a region where my dad was a mover and a shaker, we had his name. Gary is Gary Jr., right? So they knew those were the Christophers. So we were good. Okay. Right. And then when you move out of that environment and you go into a new environment, Gary and I always had each other. We're 11 months apart. So for he and I, it was always about sticking together and doing whatever we needed to do to protect each other and then even more importantly, protect our mother and protect our sisters. So through the ups and the downs, through what some people would call poverty or whatever it might be, the hard situations. I mean, we even dealt with, for example, when we were kids. I still remember to this day, and I don't even know if I've told this story before, but as a retaliation for some things that my father had been doing, around 1 o'clock at night, one night, a Molotov cocktail bomb was thrown in our house, right? House up in flames. And my dad runs through the house, gets my sisters, my mom out the house, gets my brother and I out the house. And I still remember I had on, at the time, the DARE program was super popular.
Yes.
I had on a red shirt with the white DARE across. I'm sitting on the front line. I see my brother and I look at my father, the paramedics, the fire trucks, and I see him finally walk out the house, and then he just passes out. And he has 3rd-degree burns all the way up his legs. And he didn't even think twice because he was going to get everybody out that house by any means necessary. So for my brother and I, seeing those types of examples, and there's other stories, seeing those types of examples from our father, we knew by any means necessary, protect each other and protect the family. So we've always stuck very close.
So the Bible, understanding the word, and your faith has been with you since you've been on this earth. Is that safe to say?
That's very safe to say. I mean, I still remember my mom, or I don't remember, but my mom tells a story, 3-4 years old, when I was about Nicodemus II's age. They would say we'd go out in public and I'd stand up on tables and tell people, you must be born again. Right. And that's the story of where my name comes from. Nicodemus went to Jesus by night. How must you be born again? And it's a very powerful story, but I didn't know what the story meant, but I knew you must be born again. Right. And I think if you look over the course of our life, like my mother, even in my dad's transformation, it was because my mother used to tell us a story. She would take oil and anoint every single door in our house until my dad turned his life around. Right. So she believed in the power of prayer. Even in high school, when we would have friends stay the night around 5 a.m. every morning, my mom would walk through the house, anoint everybody with oil, even our guests. And our guests would be like, yo, is your mom walking around the house talking to herself? Nah, she's praying for everybody, right? And that woman is Coach, you've seen her, right? It could be at the game, it could be at the office. You just see her sitting there, she's rocking or whatever, but she's 24/7 prayer mode. So the word, the principles of God have been instilled in us from birth, and they've stuck. Fortunately, it says train up a child in the way they should go, and when they get older, they won't depart. And I think that I hope that that's come to fruition in our lives because of our parents.
Amen. From high school to Baylor, why Baylor, and was that a great decision for you?
Yeah, it was a great decision. It was because when I graduated from high school, I was 16 years old, right? So, because they started us in the education system, or they started educating us at a very young age. I was 4 in the first grade, because my parents, they did not play when it came to it. So I was 4 in the first grade. I was fortunate. So we go from high school. I graduated at 16. And my brother and I, so I still remember it, the summer after our senior year, we enrolled in a biology pre-med program at Prairie View A&M University, right? HBCU in Texas. And that was my first exposure to that environment. Wilding out, Coach. I was like, it was so crazy because I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, if I keep this up, I'm not going to make it, right? Whatever it is, I'm not going to make it, because you're exposed to the fraternities, the sororities, that lifestyle, all the above. So right away, obviously, because I've always done great in school, but because of my test scores, I had conditional admittance into Baylor. Right. Okay. Never had an issue. And that's a whole nother story about standardized tests and standardized exams and all of that. My mother is, we're going to have to talk about that later. But got conditional admittance into Baylor because of that, and never looked back. Right, never looked back. It was a great decision. It's a private university in Baylor, so my parents were happy about that. And then, or a private university in Texas, and because it has such a prestigious reputation for their academics, it was a no brainer for us.
Nicodemus, I met you. Well, I'd heard about you because you were on the staff at Purdue University. You were assistant strength and conditioning coach at Purdue. Mm-hmm. And I was looking for a strength coach, and I called Coach Painter at Purdue and just said, man, what are your thoughts? And he said, here's a guy that's phenomenal. And I hired you at Tennessee at 23 years old. And I think about that, because back then just going, I felt like this is the best candidate. I didn't care how old you were. That didn't matter to me. But at 23 years old, at that level, how was it experience for you at that age?
Coach, it was... I don't even know how to describe that experience. Before, I really, I got to tell this story. I did not know what to expect, right? Mm-hmm. Because after my interview process with you, I really didn't know what to expect.
What you mean? What you mean, Coach Nick? Coach, talk to me, Coach Nick.
Coach, I remember. All right, so I remember Coach Painter had come down to the weight room. He said, Zoe's going to call you, right? He said, Zoe's going to call you. I was like, okay. So I called my brother. I'm like, yo, Coach Martin's going to call me. I'm in the running for the Tennessee job, right? So I'm getting my resume, getting everything together. You get on the phone. I knew you were driving, right? Because you can hear a little bit in the background. First thing you asked me, I'll never forget. You said, are you a warrior? I'm like, oh. Excuse me? You said, are you a warrior? I'm like, so this is what type of time. Oh yeah, Coach, I'm a warrior. What you mean? what you looking for? You said, are you a warrior? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, so if you see a brick wall, what you gonna do? By that time, you had me hyped up. I'm gonna break through that wall, Coach. What you talking about? A brick wall? And then you say, I'll never forget, hold on 1 second. Can I get those chicken tenders? you start ordering. You start ordering food. And they say, oh, so you're a warrior, huh? And then like, tell me about your background. And that's when that was the first time I told you the story. I was like, Coach, I come from nothing. I remember we used to have to boil water, pour it in a trash can with soap, and take a bath in the trash can. He's like, oh, I like that. I'm like, we finished that call, interview, whatever it is. My brother calls me right away. He's like, how'd you do? I was, bro, I don't know. I've never experienced anything like that. But looking back in hindsight now, it just shows who you are and your personality and all the above. But to answer your question, Coach, I didn't know what to expect, right? Because and to be full transparency, I'm so thankful to this day for that opportunity, because I think you saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself at the time. And you had to have, right? And I think that you've always cultivated that and you've always nurtured that in me, because at 23 years old, I thought it was all about writing the best program. That's what I thought it was all about. So I really wasn't ready. I think I had the knowledge, but I didn't have the wisdom, right? That's a completely different thing. I had the facts and the information, but I didn't yet know how to apply that. But you taught me that. I still remember the first time you had to get on me. We were in the weight room. It was Brandon Lopez. I told Brandon Lopez, we had these different boxes. We had the different boxes that we would do step ups and all that. I told Brandon Lopez to do an exercise, and then I scrapped it. And I was like, no. Actually, I want you to do this. You never micromanaged me. You never told me what you wanted me to do in the weight room. None of our conversations were ever about X's and O's. But I remember you pulled me aside later that day and you said, Nicodemus, you said, Coach Nick, when you tell them to do something, stick with it, right? You said you always remain consistent. You said you have to be consistent with the messages that you're sharing with these young guys. And that stuck with me to this day, right? And I see that, you're a picture of consistency, right? I think we've known each other for 15, 16 years now, however long it's been. And you've been that consistent figure, right? And you taught me so many lessons along the way because you knew the part that you can't teach is the work ethic. You knew I had the work ethic. You knew I was going to do whatever it is to find the answers to whatever the problems were. But there were some other things that had to be developed. So I appreciate you taking the chance on me, Coach, for sure.
No, thank you. And Nicodemus, how did you feel being 23 in one of the top jobs in the country? You're talking about a strength and conditioning coach, the head strength and conditioning coach at Tennessee with the basketball team. How did you feel being that young, but also a young black man with dreads in your hair in the South? How did you feel about all that?
Because I was with you, it was different. Because you always preach, be who you are, right? And I've seen you and I saw you then always fight for a young black man, right? And I knew, like, you, just how you move invigorated me to be who I was, right? Because I knew I always have coach wants me to be the 23-year-old young black man who can have these conversations with the players and get them to do things that probably other people couldn't do because I'm the 23-year-old with dreads and because I can relate to them. So it was, I grew up in the South, so I was well aware of the racism and the things of that nature. But you created an environment where everybody always felt protected, right? Now, there were instances where Fallon and I, when we got engaged, because she was a local sports figure, because she was a sports anchor and reporter and all that, she had to deal with it a little bit more than me when they were like, oh, you're a end lover, you're this, you're that, you're this and that. Once we announced that we were engaged, and people came at her every type of way, you with that monkey and this and that, and this, just to be frank, right? So I think it was eye-opening for her. But I grew up in the South, right? I remember times in high school where we have the highway patrol calling us the N-word and pulling us out the car and all the above. So that part never fazed me. My father knew what he was doing when he raised my brother and I, so we were built for that piece. But you created an environment where everybody felt protected, Coach.
Wow, just hearing all that. Because again, whatever 2 cents I have, I apologize. Even what Fallon went through, and I love her just as much as I love you. And to hear that, because again, when you're going, and you never brought that to me, like, hey, Coach, I'm this, what they're saying and all that. So I appreciate that, but I also apologize at the same time, man, because I think my job as a coach and lead, but also be a protector. Not that you needed that from me, but I owe that to you. Nicodemus.
Nah, but Coach, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it goes back to what I was saying. Like, it was never a second. I've always felt protected. I think you've always created an environment for not, and yes, you have, there's different roles. You have players, you have coaches, you have operations, but you created a family environment, and we always knew that you were holding that umbrella over us. So it did not matter if it was raining outside, and that rain metaphorically could be the racist slurs that were being used. It could be the criticism and all of that was coming our way. You held that umbrella, and you stood out in the rain and kept that umbrella over us the whole time. So I never, even in dealing with that, I probably never felt the full blunt of it, because I was always one of your coaches. I was always one of your assistants. I was always under your protection. So we were good. We were good.
But Nicodemus, isn't it, as we talk about this now, isn't it strange, crazy, or weird the stuff that we dealt with, and we just keep flowing like it's normal, or we used to it, or we expect it. When you're talking of sport, it's not as if we're in a battlefield, a World War I, II, and all that, or civil rights movement. We're actually playing a sport, but we don't complain. We don't make excuses. Like it's understood. Let's just keep moving. Man, that is a weird feeling when you really think about it.
Coach, I look back and you think of all the different things that we just normalized. We knew certain players weren't not going to come play for your program because you were a black head coach. We knew some of the resources that other programs had, we weren't going to have because you were a black head coach. And not only were you a black head coach, you had a predominantly black staff, right? So we knew that the resources weren't going to be there. We knew that we were at a quote unquote disadvantage with recruiting. We knew that the support was not going to be there, from behind the scenes and from the fan base. So we knew that we were starting 40 yards behind the finish line, right? But we did what we had to do.
Yes.
Like it was okay, this is what it is. Keep it pushing.
Yes.
Let's go. But when you sit back and you think, like, yo, you look at the players that we were able to get, the success that we were able to have, the 21 straight home wins, or it might have been
28.
more than that, 28 straight home wins. It was the highest seed in Cal history for the NCAA tournament. You look at some of the teams that we had and how you were able to turn those plays. Every single place you've been, you've left it better than you found it, period. And more importantly, you left the people better than you found them. You left the community better than you found them. So, yeah, like I just watched you. I'll say this. Somebody told me before, a standard isn't a standard and a principle isn't a principle unless it's worth suffering over. And I've watched you for years stand 10 toes down for your standards and your principles, and mainly the ones that deal with protecting those young men that you were coaching. And I watch you take the bullets, take everything in order to protect everybody within your program. So when we talk about standards and principles, like, Coach, you literally were willing to suffer for your standards and principles, right? And that's why different, right?
That's powerful, Nick. Nick, Nicodemus, one thing that used to make you angry when you would come in my office and you were trying to figure out, like, with some players, like, Coach, why can't he or a couple of them grasp what you're really doing and trying to help them with? Because again, often, and as I would say, oftentimes with young guys and players, they're playing the game on the court. They can't see 10 or 15 years down the road. They can't see what goes on behind the scenes where they're being protected in a lot of areas where we take the quote-unquote bullets for them. But you would get angry about that because you would try to help them realize, hey, man, do you realize the guy that what he's really about and what he's trying to do and what he cares most about? You remember those talks?
I do. Because, Coach, I was living it out in real time, right? Because we just talked about my background. And when you hired me, I was making $19,000 per year. And when you put me on, you said, trust me. From the beginning, you just asked me to trust you. Coach, from the time, and I'll never forget, Coach Webster called me after you hired me. He was the first person that called me, and we had a conversation. He was like, you're going to find out very quickly what type of man Coach Martin is. And he told me this, and I didn't understand it. He said, just the type of person he is, you're never going to want to disappoint him. And I didn't understand it when he told me. And then I start working for you. And I understand that because you told me, you was like, Nicodemus, trust me. He said, Coach Nick, just trust me. And I saw you take me from $19,000 a year to well in the six figures per year just by trusting you, right? I saw you take me from a 23-year-old who was kind of getting caught up in oh, now this article is coming out and this and this, and
Mm.
there's shining lights and all that. And Cole would love to hear this, but the tight shirts get a little bit tighter, right? Because there's always there's always a camera around. And you sitting me down and telling me what your coach told you. You said, if you read the good, you have to read the bad. So don't read it at all.
Mm.
If you watch the good, you have to watch the bad. So don't watch it at all. So I'm in real time applying the principles that you're trying to teach these young men, and I'm seeing the fruit that's coming from applying the things that you're telling them. And all you have to do is just trust what Coach Martin is saying. So that part I just didn't understand. I mean, I understand it a little bit now as an adult and as I've matured, but that part just frustrated me. Right? Just trust Coach. Yeah, I remember those conversations.
Amen. Coach Nicodemus, what does wellness mean to you?
Oh man, that's a loaded question, Coach. I think most people don't even realize if you look at that word wellness, the main word being well, it's actually synonymous with the word peace, right? So if you study the etymology, the origin of that word peace, it means to be well, right? It means to be healthy, to be whole, to be complete, to prosper, to move forward. So when you talk about wellness and you talk about being well, it means to be at peace, right? To have that inner sense of calm, to have that ability to move forward in every area of your life. It means to have covenant relationships, to have security. So most people think wellness and they just think health, right? And that is an aspect of wellness, but there's so much more than that. And I look at wellness, I call them my 7 dimensions of well-being, because I think that we are interconnected, and every area of our life is interconnected. And I think that if you have lack or need in one area, it bleeds over into the other. So the 7 dimensions of well-being, where you want to be complete and whole and move forward, or you want to have spiritual well-being, physical well-being, psychological well-being, generational well-being, relational well-being, financial well-being, and professional well-being. So you have to look at life as a plate or a pie. And all of those 7 areas you have to pour into equally. And if you're not pouring into them equally, then you're not well. Because let's say we see it all the time. If a young guy is dealing with psychological or emotional stress, it pours over into their finances. It pours over into their career. It pours over into their relationships. So wellness it's a vast word, but ultimately it means to have peace, to be complete, and to be whole, and to be moving forward in all of those areas.
That's powerful. I was going to, now, I was going to say you should have wrote a book for that, but now here's your book, Out of Order.
Yeah.
Now, I have to tell you, Nicodemus, I was so proud of you when you wrote the book. I'm not surprised, but proud of you, because I think it's a phenomenal book. But man, I tell you, it was like you were hitting me in my chest as I was reading it. Like, man, this is, and I had to go some places, and this is 100. It was some of the stuff, and for those that can't see, this book is called Out of Order. Nicodemus did a tremendous job with this book, but I have to say, man, you talked about this, but man, some of this stuff I didn't want to, because he has segments in there where you can write in the book. I took some of that stuff to my personal journal, because I just felt like, man, if I give this book, or somebody come to my house and say, man, this Nicodemus book, and they start reading through it, I didn't want them to see, not that I'm embarrassed about anything, but you pull stuff out in that book. And it's one everybody should have, because I just felt like, hold on, let me redirect this and put it in my journal, my personal journal. I couldn't have it in this book because it was real. What made you write it?
Coach, it was because you take now 15 years, and I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the best professional athletes in the world, some of the best businessmen and businesswomen, some of the best founders and CEOs of top companies. And I realized that they didn't have peace, right? That word wellness. They didn't have peace. They had achieved what they defined as success. But sometimes I think we have to redefine success, because what we define as success is just some type of professional achievement. That's not success. But they reached this level of success and still had no peace, right? They still had chaos. Behind the scenes, below the surface, they were struggling, right? Some people were depressed, some people were suicidal. And I just had to ask myself, like, what is it? You've achieved what I thought was the pinnacle of success, but you have no peace. So I challenged myself to study peace at least every day. When it started, I said every day for a year, 365 days, you have to study peace. Right. And I just became obsessed with finding out, what is peace? How do you find it? What are the steps to achieving peace in your life? And I reached well over a year. But along those studies, I found out that order is a prerequisite to peace. So in order to have peace in your life, you have to establish order, right? And that word order, I'm going to use that word etymology again. If you look at the origin of the word order, it actually means there's some roots and some suffixes and prefixes that make up that word. But the different variations of that come out to mean to speak, to think, movement in a revolution of time, to rake up, which means to cultivate, prioritization, proper arrangement, arranged roles, arranged ideas, sequencing, right? So you take all of that, and essentially order means that you have to understand the arranged ideal for your life, be in alignment with the arranged ideal for your life, and allow that arranged ideal, which we call purpose, to dictate how we move, how we think, how we speak, and put yourself in an environment for growth, which is where we get the word cultivation from. So I realized a lot of people just don't have order. And even if you have it in 1 or 2 or 3 of those 7 dimensions, most people don't have it in all 7 dimensions of your life. So that's why I wrote the book. And it's actually a guided journal, because I believe that if you take the time to be introspective and practice self-examination, you'll start to figure out who you are and what the arranged idea is for your life. And now you can prioritize, which is order, prioritization. You can prioritize your steps and how you move and how you think and how you speak based off of that. But it's deep work. I wrote it and I did it first, Coach. I called it 40. I challenged myself. I did a challenge. It was called 40 Days and 40 Nights, where I challenged myself to answer these questions over 40 days and 40 nights. And I still remember because I was going back and forth about whether to release it. But it was one morning. It was probably about 5:45 a.m. in the morning. And I was sitting there doing one of the journaling exercises and just in tears. Because it was part of it was that story that I talked about, because I realized that it was the kid that was laughed at that junior Sayal camp that went and bought the Mercedes Benz, that went and bought the Louis Vuitton belts, that was going and trying to buy the Gucci shoes and all that, because of those insecurities that I had never dealt with, right? So I was hiding behind these things because I had never dealt with who I was and why I'm here and why God placed me here on this earth. So it was just so eye-opening for me. First, that was the day that I knew I had to share this with the world.
That's powerful, that.
Yeah.
Nicodemus, do you think, because we've heard these terms for years, work-life balance. Do you think that is doable? What does that mean to you, work-life balance?
Coach, it's a great question. I don't believe in balance, right? Since I wrote this book and I actually studied the word order, we call it balance, but I think the right word that we should be searching for is order, right? I think you have to be able to put first things first. You have to have priorities in life. And if you don't have a vision for your life, then you can't have priorities, right? Because vision dictates who I am and where I'm going. So if I don't know who I am, if I don't know my identity and I don't know where I'm going, I don't have a vision, I can't prioritize. Another reason why that's a great question is because I've watched you have those priorities and maintain them. Coach, God, family, period. Nothing, you've never allowed anything to come before that, right? So I've seen you put those first things first. So I mean, yeah, I don't believe in work-life balance, because there's going to be times where, you're not able to be, especially in sports, because of the nature of the business, you're not able to be home as much as you would like, which would say that you're in balance. But if you understand prioritization, you understand, even when I'm on the road, okay, I have to face it, because I mean the NBA is 82 games, 82 game season, right? So we travel a ton when I'm working with those guys. So it's a ton of travel, but I'm setting aside time first thing in the morning for my devotional for God. I'm setting aside time for family, right? Like I have this non-negotiable time every day from about 7:30 to 8:30 or 7:30 to 9, where that's Nicodemus the second's time. You can't get in the way. Right now, that might be an hour and a half a day, and I spend 10 hours working, but I put him first. Yes. Right. So that's why I said it's about order and prioritization, not balance, because that's not balance. Yes. 10 hours versus 1.5, but he came first. He came before that. So I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in having order and making sure that you do the first things first.
Okay, I'm going to take that balance out and use order. I really like that. Question for you, Nick. When I was coaching, and even on my, and I'm just asking this because I've never asked you this before, and when you have time to reflect on the bad days, how did you see me as a father and a husband? How did you see that? How was that experience from your lens when you saw me as a father and a husband?
You said on the bad days?
Yeah, I'm just talking on the bad days, whenever, or tough loss. I was out in the office or around my family, Coach, my children.
That's why I had to ask you that. Like, what the culture or the world or the sports world would define as a bad day, we never felt in the office. Like it could be, like, you were the epitome of showing up as yourself and being the same person every single day. Win, loss, whatever it was. Coach, I mean, yeah, there were bad, quote unquote, bad days, right? Where there was frustration and all of that, but you were the same. You did not allow. I heard it was a pastor. I think it was, I forget the pastor it was, but it was talking about how Jesus was asleep in the boat, right? With all this chaos going on outside. And they said that you can have peace as long as you don't allow what's going on outside to get inside the boat. And I've watched you. We were together for 10 seasons. I watched you for 10 seasons never allow what was happening outside the boat come inside the boat. Right. So that's one of the life lessons that I've taken, one of the thousands or hundreds of thousands of life lessons that I've taken away from you, is do not allow what's going on outside the boat to take place inside the boat, period.
I got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
One is, I thought you did a tremendous job as a strength and conditioning coach and eventually director. What transitioned to you to what you're doing now, and can you describe that?
Yeah, I think one of the big transitions was it's funny because people would refer to me when I was working collegiately. Obviously, you're a director of performance, you're a performance coach, you're a strength and conditioning coach. Within your program, I was never that. It was always more. Coach, I was on flights with you to go to this event and that event, and you were exposing me to things that traditionally strength and conditioning coaches aren't exposed to. I was going to fundraisers with you. We were flying across you were exposing me to all kind of things. You were exposing me to what takes place in administration, all of this behind the scenes. So for me, it was never just about strength and conditioning. It was all about finding ways to pour into these young men and help them move forward in their life. I think that I got to a point in my career where, because of the NCAA, just to keep it 100, and the rules around collegiate strength and conditioning, I was put in a box.
Mm-hmm.
I just named 7 dimensions of well-being. And they always, if you step outside of that
Yes.
physical or that physiological box, oh, that's not your scope of practice,
Mm.
is what they love to say. Right. And I'm like, well, if these 7 dimensions aren't being addressed on a daily basis, then if you're either being intentional or you're practicing apathy and you're
Yes.
doing nothing in any area in your life
Man.
that you're not intentional about, you're going backwards. There's decay. So you either have intentionality or you're apathetical and your life is decaying, whether you know it or not. So because the governing bodies or whoever it may be, I was put in a box and I wasn't allowed to pour into these young guys in all 7 dimensions. I got to a point where you and I had that conversation. I remember we sat in your office for about an hour and you knew, because you knew that you were like, Nicodemus, there's always like,
I don't mean to cut you
more.
off, but I just, it was time for you, because I felt like part of my job is to be able to see that and recognize that what I want to lose, but I also understand as a man, husband, and father, you got to do what's best for you, because your gifts were, I think your gifts passed the college game. I think they did. Now, it was unfortunate for a student athlete because they get to experience all those things that you provided, because you were more than just a guy. Okay, let's lift weights. I mean, it was from a spiritual standpoint. Let's go hang out. Let's talk. What's going on in life? You did all those things, and I never looked at you as a guy. Just, okay, your time in the weight room with Coach Nicodemus, because as you know, when you're part of our staff, you're part of a family. We got to make it all go together. But I just felt like it was your purpose is now doing what you're doing, and to be able to work with a lot of people. I mean, CEOs of companies, all type of people. I think what you have, they need, and your level of humility will take you all the way to the top, and whatever the top is. I mean, because I think you have those gifts, and I'm so happy and so proud of you. But I got one more question for you, and this is a question I ask from time to time. If there was one thing in this world you could change, what would it be?
Coach, I've heard you ask this question, and I've thought about it, and I've pondered it over and over and over and over and over again. And I think the thing that I would change is ignorance. Right? Because if you, for example, you take racism, for example, I know that that's a very popular answer. People will want to change racism. Racism is the result of ignorance. Ignorance has 2 facets. It's you're misinformed or you're uninformed. So you take the origins of racism, and there were people or a group of people who were so who were so uninformed that they thought that they had to subjugate a group of people to provide more for themselves out of whatever. I mean, it might have been greed, whatever it was. They thought that they had to take this group of people, put them in bondage, and make them do atrocious things day after day after day after day for their own personal gain, right? That's ignorance. And the way that ignorance is perpetuated is now I teach the next generation that this is how it has to be in order for you to stay ahead. Now that's misinformation. Now I'm misinforming the next generation. So it starts with one person being uninformed, and then they spread that to the next generation, and now you're misinformed. And now ignorance, the seed of ignorance, has grown into racism and prejudice and all the other things. So I think that at the root of the majority of the thing, even we have so many people in this country that are homeless, don't have a place to stay. We don't have a capital issue in America. It's not like we don't have the resources. It's ignorance, right? People don't have the heart for those homeless. They think that, oh, well, they're drug addicts and they're this and they're that, so they deserve that plight. That's ignorance, right? A lot of the issues that we see and that we deal with today are the result of people being uninformed or misinformed. So if I could change anything, I would change ignorance.
It all counts, family. It's been a wonderful episode. And again, out of order, Nicodemus Christopher, phenomenal man, teacher, and leader.
And
everybody
Coach,
need to get this book.
I don't want to interrupt you. I have to, because you allowed me to come on this platform. And I know I've shared this with you behind the scenes. But I have to personally thank you, because, Coach, I'm not sitting in this seat today without you. And you know, I'm not an emotional person. And I didn't think I am not the man that I am. And I do not have the success that I have without you. You took a chance on me, and I cannot thank you enough. Coach, I appreciate you. I appreciate Miss Roberta, because even behind the scenes, I'm not who I am without her. So, Coach, I apologize for the emotion. Nicodemus Christopher isn't Nicodemus Christopher without you. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you, Coach.
Thank you. It all counts, family. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. This is real, and this is who we are. Take care.